Hello, it's me again. Okay, this is part 3 and hopefully the final part. I realize that there's too much that I'm glossing over in my journey, and some of it is just special and worthwhile sharing, and some of it is just so funny and unique and like a movie. So yeah, also worth sharing. So for those of you who have been following, careful what you wish for. Here's part 3. So part of what I had neglected to talk about or go into detail about was when I resigned from the Air Force, I went back to my hometown. I remember my uncle taking me back to Durban with my motorcycle on a trailer at the back of his bakkie with all my meager possessions. Leaving the Air Force, he probably thought, oh, my nephew, what is wrong with you? But yep, I couldn't care less. I was now going to live my life for Jesus. So when I went back to Durban, there was a period of my searching that I then worked for my dad, who runs his own business for many years, a plumbing business. So I worked for him for a bit. I soon realized plumbing was not for me. Nope. Me and manual labor. I like to think I'm a luxury liner, built for comfort, like a Boeing. Anyway, so he was not going to have me lazing around. So I started, helping him with work and so on, which was an eye-opener. But yeah, it was such a special time because I was now fast and furiously, as I said in the previous videos, searching. So he gave me a vehicle, a VW Combi, it was the iconic 60s microbus, or VW Combi, which didn't look anything like the one behind me, but it was the same vehicle. So I've kept this picture on my wall. I'm now sitting in my dining room as a reminder of that very special journey. If you look behind me, there it is. So that's a really pretty one, as you can see. But yeah, it's just a picture to other people, but to me, I keep it in my home on the wall as a reminder of where I've come from and this very special journey. So I would use this vehicle to get around, to go and do all my investigations, to go up and down to the university, to go and study and search and research. I would gather literature from all over the show, and the back of this vehicle had a pile of books. It was something to behold. I had even put curtains in it. It seems so funny now because I can only imagine how batshit crazy I looked to my family, and I just couldn't care. I would sit at the beach inside this vehicle for hours on end, reading. It's so funny looking at it now, but back then it was what I needed to do, like the desert needed rain. And I was just fixated with going through this process. So that's the other part about the journey. It's that vehicle, which is very special to me. I hope to get another one day. So the other part that I didn't go into much detail about, which I think is useful, is the Middle East, living in Iran. That was a hell of an experience. It wasn't too long, maybe 2 or 3 years. But so this is how it went down. So we arrive in Iran, my ex-wife and I, her pregnant. We get there. Now, moving to the Middle East is pretty unique. Well, I suppose to any country that's not a westernized country and where English is not the language. So we land with this friend of ours, and he speaks English, and he's about the only one who speaks English. So we are stuck on him because he's the only way for us to communicate. The language, for those of you who don't know, is Farsi, which is Persian. It's ancient Persia, Iran. Theocracy, yay. So we land there. I remember clearly, the shock to the system that being there was. Everything, the language, the culture, the dressing, how religious the society is and conservative, the driving, wow. So indicators are an optional extra there, turn signals for you Americans. They don't use them. If you've ever watched any videos of driving in India, it's like that. Wherever there's a gap, you go. So as we left the airport, I was traumatized. I kept thinking we're going to crash any second because wherever there's a gap, someone squeezes their nose in and everyone else just brakes. In my country, South Africa, you would be sworn or murdered for doing things like that. No one bats an eyelid because they all do it. So that was the first thing I remember about being there, which was scary at first, but then funny. And then eventually I started driving there, and I had a motorcycle there, and I started driving just like them. If you can't beat them, join them. So we then moved straight to the city of Qom, which is the desert city, pretty much like the Vatican of Iran. It is the epicenter of Shiite Islam in Iran, where all the mullahs are bred and study. Well, many of them there. My ex was pregnant, so she couldn't attend any classes and so on. And I started classes immediately because the first thing was to learn the language. So there I was as an adult sitting in a class while all my friends back in South Africa were busy at universities or pursuing life, normal life. There I was in the Middle East going a, e, o, ba, be, bo, ta, te, to, learning the phonetics and pronunciation of the language. A language which I eventually grew to love. It's a very beautiful and poetic language, which I now know. Not exactly a skill that I'll use every day, but to give you an idea of what it sounds like, for example, if I were to say in Persian, hi, my name is O, and I'm South African, and I lived in Iran for a few years. It would sound something like this. Salam, ismi man Earl ast و اهل آفریقای جنوبی هستم و یه مدت تو ایران زندگی کردم. Yeah, so it's a really pretty language, very poetic, which I actually love, and I miss speaking. So I look for any opportunity now to find Iranians to talk to them. I was in Cape Town not so long ago and standing alone at near the harbor, and I saw these two guys, which once you know the people, you just know what they look like. Well, one of the things that makes Iranians stick out is their shoes, which are always dirty. The guy will have a really amazing suit on, but his shoes are dirty. Because a lot of the place is dusty and so on. So that's just the way it is. So I picked up that these guys were Iranian, and I just walked up to them and started speaking Persian, and they were flabbergasted. So yeah, very pretty language. It was very difficult initially because we literally didn't know what bread was or milk or how to take a taxi or anything. So I was under pressure to learn quick and fast. The taxi drivers, like most any other place, are ruthless. Once they see you're a foreigner and don't understand the money, they will rob you. So the first thing I learned was about the money. Then I would, go to the shops and stuff, and strangely, people are weird, eh? So they would be laughing at me as a foreigner because I couldn't speak their language, and I would be struggling to communicate what it is I want in a shop. And instead of appreciating my effort, they would find this funny. So that pissed me off. And I started learning the language quick and fast. I remember having a little notebook in my pocket where I would sit in company of Iranians, and all words that I didn't know, I would write them down as I heard them. And then I'd go home later and check in the dictionary or ask one of my colleagues at the university or one of my friends to translate it for me and give me the meaning. So like that, it was a puzzle. I started learning and learning really fast. Till eventually I was able now to communicate effectively, and I couldn't be taken for a ride anymore, which was really cool. So that as far as the language is concerned, it was a rough time for my ex. She was pregnant. The food was different. Food we now love because our palates obviously got used to it. But at that time, she couldn't touch the food. So all she was eating was fried chips with copious amounts of yogurt on it and vinegar and stuff. Shame. Anyway. So I started studying. Once I had now learned a bit of the language, started studying the course, which was basically a course on Islam. I was basically on a road to becoming a mullah or what they call a ruhani, like a scholar or an imam, but an Iranian one, which is very different and very unique. I wish I could find the pictures of it to show you all. I actually was wearing the garb and stuff with the beard and the turban and wow. So there I was studying the course, which I realized after some time wasn't exactly what I wanted. I didn't think it was quite suitable for the African context. So I decided that I needed to rather study alone, as in study on my own, whatever I wanted to, and then in order to support ourselves, because we were receiving a stipend from the institution, it meant I would have to work part-time. So, work and then study part-time. So we then on that basis decided to move from the city of Qom back to the capital, Tehran, which was probably about 100 kilometers away. Once there, we started then working, my ex and I, she is a journalist, and studied journalism. So we started working in the foreign broadcasting section of their national broadcaster, Seda o Sima, what it's called in Persian. I got a job just by virtue of the fact that English is my mother tongue. In that part of the world, this is huge. You're like a professor just because English is your mother tongue. And my ex also, both of us got jobs as newsreaders on the radio. So it's the foreign broadcasting section of their national broadcaster. It was broadcasting to the UK and to the US. So from there, it then moved a bit further. My ex got a job as a host of a show on TV, interviewing politicians and diplomats and important people on political issues of the day and so on, which was great. I continued in radio. I then created a show which was so cool. This was a dialogue between what I created, a Muslim woman and an inquiring Westerner, a man. Specifically making the Muslim had to be a woman, because women are portrayed as oppressed in Islam, which we obviously were trying to fight, that stigma. And so she needed to be the one explaining Islam. So every week I would create this dialogue of Peter and Fatima, where it would be scripted, and it would be Peter basically asking her to explain different things about Islam or the impressions in the West about Islam, and she would provide the answers to dispel those stigmas or whatever. It became very popular. We had lots of listeners. They would write into us, and it was a lot of fun. Anyhow, so we continued like this for a good while, but then we realized that, okay, now we're just making money. We're making a lot of money because they paid us in their local currency as well as dollars, US dollars. But that's not what I went to Iran for. And I found that because of now working full time, I had basically no time or energy to be studying. So now it just became like pointless, and eventually I decided, nope, I think it's time to go back home. We were really missing home also because, yeah, north, south, east, west, home's best. South Africa isn't the greatest place in the world, probably one of the highest crime rates in the world, especially Johannesburg, but it's home. And I was just missing everything also about home. And then we decided, yeah, since we are now not achieving what we set out to come back to South Africa. So that's more about the Iran experience. Once I came back to South Africa, I did work for an Islamic organization. At one point, I was like, wow, when I think about it, from where I am today, it's simply mind-blowing. So I was like the deputy imam in a Shiite mosque here in Johannesburg. I was the guy who was leading the Friday prayers. I was the guy who was standing up and giving lectures to Muslims as an imam in the mosque. That's what I was doing. So, yeah, quite an about turn. Life's a box of chocolates, as Forrest Gump says. Mama always said. Yeah. And then the rest you now know. I eventually decided to walk away from religion and become atheist. I hope you've enjoyed it. And this is now, I think, I promise, well, I hope so, the last.